education. What are you going to teach young people if you have no idea what they're going to do with the rest of their lives? And what we also know is that 30 or 40 years ago, people would come out and do one job for the whole of their life. Now you do a job for 5 years, that job goes, you have to invent a completely new job. So what are the set of skills that you need? Because what the world is looking for is not job seekers, but job creators. All over the world, this is true. There is a big economic crisis. We know that the unemployment is felt mainly amongst young people because they come out of university or they come out of school expecting there to be jobs which they're ready to do. I'll just let everyone pull up some chairs. Do you want to get some chairs from the back? So, for most of you in your lives, this is going to be the challenge. And the question then is, what are the skills that schools will need to give you in order to be able to do that? But let's just talk a little bit about what's happening in schools internationally.
Lack of motivation.
You all know him. We are. So, you might have heard of PISA. PISA is an international exam which is done by an organisation called the OECD. And basically, samples of 15 and 16-year-olds in many of the developed economies in the world sit exams in science, mathematics and literacy. It then produces an average score for each country. It then produces a league table, and then that gets published and politicians start shouting at each other. That's the system. These are some slides from PISA. But what PISA doesn't tell you is that as well as measuring the test score, they measure how interested and how confident people are in the subject. And the reason they measure interest and confidence is what decides that you will go on and be successful in the subject you're studying is how interested and confident you are. That's more important than your test score. Einstein is an example. He was not a good student. He only got a third-class degree. He couldn't get a job in university after that. He had to get a job as a secretary, but he was so interested and confident, he wrote the theory of relativity in his spare time when he was working as a secretary. So, PISA does this research and then produces some graphs, and they look like this. Along here, you have the test scores, and up here you have how interested people are. And the little dots are the countries. These were back in 2009. Now, we know in PISA, Finland always wins. And everybody talks, why can't we be more like Finland? Because they all get such great test scores. But what this shows is they are the least interested in science in the world. Because what they have been taught to do is how to pass exams, not to be interested in the subject. And therefore, none of them are going to go and be scientists. The reason we put so much emphasis on young people learning science is we need more scientists. But if we teach them in such a way that they actually are just not interested, then we've completely defeated the system. This is how the PISA calls it self-concept. But basically, is this a subject you think you're good at? And here you have the Japanese and the Koreans who get fantastic science scores, but they all think they're bad at the subject. And again, it comes back to the pedagogy, the way in which they're taught. They're taught in a way that when they pass their exams, what they think is, well done, my teachers. They don't think I did well. They just think I was driven to it. In Korea, children, high school children, go to school from 7:30 in the morning to 1:30 the next morning. That's how long the day is. Every Korean school I've ever been into has had children fast asleep in it, because you can't go on like that without sleeping, and so forth. At the back of Korean classrooms, you have high tables with no chairs.
To sleep.
No, because it's harder to sleep when you're standing up.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, of course.
to avoid it. Absolutely. This is PISA math scores and entrepreneurial capacity. So this is, are you the kind of person who's going to create jobs? So here you are, you've got Singapore, Korea, Taiwan, Finland, fantastic math scores, but none of them think they're any good at creating jobs. And we say that the future is going to be creating jobs, and yet the way we teach people seems to have the opposite effect. And it's partly what we're measuring. And this is another PISA slide, so these aren't slides that I've made, and this actually looks at science scores and youth suicide rates. And it looks like that. The higher the science score, the more likely that young people are going to commit suicide. You've got Korea, Japan, Finland, very, very high suicide rates. This is research we did in England. So we commissioned it from Cambridge University, and it was about looking at well-being. Yannick.
Self-esteem.
And yes, it includes self-esteem, so it was quite a wide set of measures there. But we surveyed 5,000 young people in school between grade 3 and grade 10. And what you have here is grade 3, grade 6, grade 8, grade 10, and this is how happy children were, basically, and so forth. And you see, as they move through school, they get less than happy. Absolutely. And this is how competent they feel. And in England, grade 6 is the last year of primary school, and then you go to secondary school, and there's a bit of an increase in competence, because in your last year in primary school, you're bigger, you know more, you run faster than everyone else, so you feel good. But then you go to secondary school, and it comes down. It also feels very authentic, because blue is boys and green is girls. And boys are always more likely to say they're better than they really are. So this is self-assessment, this isn't reality, and so forth. But if you stopped people in the street and said, what's the point of education? They would say, the point of education is to make young people competent. And if you said, well, the research says the longer they are in school, the less competent they feel, you'd think, well, we have to ask some fundamental questions about what's going on in education. So, this is my first question to you. What I'd like you to do is just spend 2 or 3 minutes talking to each other about whether you recognise this from your experience of education. And then I'll get 1 or 2 of you to give me some feedback, okay? So talk to people sitting next to you. Do you recognise this? And then we'll take a couple of questions.
Do you recognise this?
Do you recognise this?
Ce n'est pas le fait de rester longtemps dans l'université qui limite notre confiance en soi, mais c'est plutôt le manque de pratique. C'est-à-dire qu'on peut rester dans l'université pendant longtemps et on pratique en même temps. Donc c'est...
Oui, je comprends. Oui, that's a good point. I like that. Some more thoughts from people.
Maybe the more we study, the more we find out that there is more
to know.
Yes. And we get depressed by that.
No, I think that's a good question. I think that's a good reflection. Yes, but I'll come back to that. Any more thoughts? Yes.
Talking about creativity, culture, and education is a crucial thing to avoid it. But we are identifying in this presentation that in the 6th degree in the British education system, it's referred to our CZMANI with 6th degree in our education. So it's we are punishing the adult word, the teenager word. It's a bit like culture, and we don't blossom creativity. We let it blossom by itself. It's like having mine of energy, and we are more and more underestimated. In the sixth grade, we are passing to the college, to the high school, secondary school. So it is a conflict in the society, and in the micro society, in the high school, it is an environment. Pronunciation is quite difficult, but it's we can see it's worldwide.
It's a worldwide phenomenon. It's a world issue. Exactly.
I think we should give a mark to the teachers to make a student more motivated.
Yes, and confidence. And motivation and confidence comes together. And absolutely, that exactly.
This question is very important,
because
interest of students is depend on the pedagogy.
Exactly.
The manner to teach. We saw you how you speak. You don't sit. Je m'exprime en français. Les étudiants aussi dépendent de ce qu'on leur présente. Nous sommes avec des étudiants de psychologie et la question de la créativité est fondamentale. Nous sommes des enseignants. On leur enseigne des théories, mais être psychologue, c'est aussi être créatif. C'est ne pas dépendre des programmes, c'est sortir des programmes. Et ça, c'est comment enseigner ça. C'est ça la problématique. C'est comment, how to teach. How to teach.
Okay. So that's the right thing. So I'm going to move on to the next stage to deal with that question. So we had a program called Creative Partnerships, and this is exactly what we were concerned with. So we did a lot of research to begin with, which showed that people who went through our programs did better in exams, behaved better, were more motivated, were more confident. And then we did another very big piece of research, which said, why does this happen? What is happening in the classroom that produces this better effect on young people? And there are key elements to this. First of all, this is the UNESCO definition of education. It's learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, and learning to live together. And our criticism of most education systems in the world is they mainly do learning to know.
And not the other.
And they do a little bit of learning to do, but not focusing on learning to be, which is discovering who you are and how you operate and how to use all of you, and learning to live together. And our programs were shown to be successful in focusing on those. And what we discovered is that it's not a different subject. You don't have to have learning to be lessons separate from science lessons. It's about how you teach science, not what curriculum you teach. The way we operated is we got schools to identify a problem they wanted us to work on. So schools didn't say, come and make us more creative. Schools said, we're worried about speaking and listening in grade 1, or we're worried about maths in grade 6, or we're worried about biology in grade 11, or we're worried about boys' behaviour in the playground. So whatever they wanted. And we would then work with the teachers to create a project which addressed that problem. And what the researchers said to us, after they sat in classrooms and observed a lot of our projects, is that the successful projects all have a similar way of operating, a set of characteristics which they have in common. And they summarize that set of characteristics in this way. And this has become a key concept for us. So what you have here is a spectrum, if you like. And at this end, you have what we call the high-functioning classroom,